What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Jimmy Smith, Ryan Moody, our MMA Show. We did actually a post show for UFC Overeem versus Rozenstruik. The audio, as we've talked about, I don't know what's going on. The MMA gods, we've prayed to them so much that they just really ruin our shows. So our audio's overlapped. For the sake and respect of you, we're not going to put it on YouTube, but it's there if you want to go listen to it on our podcast, or you can listen to this and pretty much get the gist of a majority of what we talked about. And, you know, I want to just preface this. Dan Miragliotta is a legend, a great referee. Seldom do we have, ref issues in MMA, but we had two come up in this event, and we wanted to take a little bit of time to sit here and talk to you guys about them. Interesting things. First of all, a lot of people didn't get my joke. Stephen Struve and Stefan Struve are two different people, okay? And much like Mike Perry will tell you, there is Donald Brown, Cowboy Cerrone and Donald Cerrone. I feel the same way about Stephen Struve in the UFC. Another time that we didn't see him really utilize his range and his size, his distance, but he did get clipped, in the sack a couple times. And to Ben Rothwell's point, which I heard, hey, listen, on a regular size person, those kicks are to the body, not to the groin. But we did get a rare glimpse of a referee covering his microphone and discussing with a fighter his personal opinion of the fight. And I really thought that was interesting, Jimmy. Had you ever seen anything like that in the past?
Never from a referee. I've seen things like that from people that shouldn't say stuff like that. I don't think I've ever heard it from a referee before. I really mean that. And for people who follow us or me on social media, I don't have the volume up when I watch fights. So I didn't know what he was talking about until I read it afterward, exactly what happened in the controversy and all that stuff. But it was one of those moments where I see what Dan was trying to do. He was trying to get the fight to continue, and he just tried to do too much, where it was, look, I don't want to call it no contest. Come on, you can do, kind of encouraging him to continue fighting and for there to be a fight. He let the moment kind of get away from him. As a referee, you can't do that. And he's a human being and make mistakes and all these things. And I really like Dan as a referee and as a person, but he overstepped his bounds in terms of a referee shouldn't care about those things. Period. If the fight's over because the guy can't continue, it's over. If you think a guy's had too much, he's had too much and it's over. And he kind of let the pressure of the crowd and everything and wanting the fight to continue, he let that get to him. But it's a mistake he shouldn't have made.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with everything you said. I mean, to a person, you can separate him. As a referee, that's what we're discussing. And as a referee, I think he made a horrendous judgment call. And I think he knows that. I think, him covering the mic is almost an indictment of him knowing, hey, listen, I shouldn't be saying this. But as you said, you've got the crowd who, for the sake of argument, did an incredible job at capturing the highs and the lows of Struve's mannerisms. But again, I think when you go back and look at what happened, if Struve's corner had been saying this, Dan would have justifiably been able to say, hey, listen, you can't coach here. If Rothwell's corner would have been coaching, he could have walked over and said, listen, I'm already taking a point for the low blows. If you continue to coach, I'm going to take more points away. I'm going to take 2, and then you're really going to be in trouble. So I guess the interesting contrast here is we saw a referee do something that a corner couldn't do to help promote a fighter to maybe continue. And ultimately, I think you can't look back at this and not say that it didn't impact Struve at least the rest of the fight, because the fight ended early. He was stopped. And when you think about it that way, I've really been taken back by the fact there was no protest to this, because I really thought this first thing was going to happen, was they were going to protest this and say, listen, Struve was, I don't want to say coerced, but, he was put in a tough spot where this was we joked in the pre-show, a loser leaves town match, right? Like everything was on the line anyway. The last thing he needed was any outside, pressure to continue to fight if he wasn't 100% ready. But, to his point, I can see where Dan was. I can see where Struve was, but it really puts him in a difficult spot going forward.
Yeah, I mean, both guys were in trouble in the heavyweight division. We talked about that a bit, Struve and Rothwell. A protest wouldn't have worked. I think his corner knows that. I think Stefan Struve knows that. Ethically, what Dan Miragliotta did was incorrect. But ultimately, the choice was still Stefan Struve's. If he had said, no, I can't continue, that's it. And the athletic commission more than likely would have said, hey, look, yeah, Dan Miragliotta may have encouraged you, which he's not supposed to do. But ultimately, you could have said, no, I can't continue. The fight's over. You could say that. Now, most fighters wouldn't. I've seen fighters continue with injuries that I know damn well they could not fight effectively, but they felt pressured to continue. I've seen guys have low blows and all kinds of stuff, and they're pressured to keep going. So they felt enough pressure as it was. I don't see any kind of formal attempt to get the fight reversed because of that. I don't see any of that working out. It's just too easy for the athletic commission to say, yeah, well, he can encourage you. He can't make you continue. Now, if he had said, no, I can't keep going, and Dan Miragliotta goes, no, I'm not allowing that. Okay, you can't do that. But Dan didn't do that. He encouraged you. That's not enough to overturn the fight. And I think Stefan Struve knows that.
Moving forward to the main event, we had a scenario where, and we talked again at length on the podcast about guy in Alistair Overeem that has a game plan. And he has to stick to this game plan. And it may not be the most exciting thing to watch, but based on where he is in his career and where he wants to go in his career, he was doing, by all accounts, what was necessary. And unfortunately, at the end of the fight, the culmination of that game plan was really going his way until about 5 to 6 seconds left in the fight, where he gets clipped with an absolutely vicious shot that rips his lip almost in half in a way that Robbie Lawler would probably say, well, mine didn't look that bad. And then obviously we see a stoppage. The interesting part of this is the stoppage comes with really Overeem coming back to his feet, Rozenstruik turning away from him, which you should never do. And then instead of having the situation where people have talked about, well, the visual of the lip indicates that it could be stopped. You really can't stop a fight for that. The doctor can, but the ref can't. We see a scenario where there are some people, myself not really being one of them, that say, hey, this was an early stoppage. I think they combine it with what happened in the Rothwell fight, and they really have a bad opinion of how this card culminated and finished out with two things we really don't see and two major inconsistencies.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, do I agree with the stoppage? I would have liked to see Overeem have the chance to defend himself for a couple seconds, even, in a situation like that. But here's the way I see it. If the speed limit is 60 miles an hour and you're going 65, can you be pulled over and given a ticket?
Yes.
Exactly. Is it kind of chicken shit? Yeah. A cop usually is not going to pull you over for going 3 to 5 miles over the speed limit. But they can. They are legally within their rights. You usually have to go a bit faster. If you're going 78 in a 60, if you're going 75 in a 60, even 70 in a 60, okay, you're almost certainly getting a ticket. But anything over 60 is a judgment call. They are within their rights to pull you over and give you a ticket. That's kind of like referees. I would have liked to see Overeem take a couple more punches and give him the opportunity to defend himself. He went down pretty good. Referee can stop it there. And he did. It's a judgment call at that point. The mitigating factors that make it interesting is that it's a fight he was clearly winning and there were only a few seconds left. Should the referee worry about those things? He certainly shouldn't worry about who's ahead. That he's not the judge. He has no idea who's ahead. He shouldn't be keeping track of that. Does he know how much time is left? Yes, there's a 10-second clapper. He had heard it go off about 5 seconds before. He knew how little time there was left. Should that influence whether or not he allows Overeem to continue? That's one of those gray areas that we've had trouble with. Chavez Taylor, for the ones who remember that years and years and years ago. Should the referee care that there are only a few seconds left? Would it have made a difference if Rozenstruik was kicking his ass the whole time? I don't know. All I can say is I've seen worse. I've seen, less damage cause the stoppage of a fight than the Rozenstruik punch. Okay. So I've definitely seen worse. And I've seen fighters who were knocked down like Overeem. The guy swarmed him. The guy kind of woke up again and was able to survive for the rest of the round when there's a lot more time than this. So I've seen both. But you drop like that, the referee has the ability to stop it. And the bottom line is Overeem should not have allowed himself to get hit with that punch with that amount of time left.
I guess it's such a stark contrast when we earlier in the card had talked about Aspinallad, Giannis Kunitskaya, and Aspinallad had a similar kind of flash knockdown that ended a fight, and then you see this. It's easy for MMA fans to kind of draw those lines, but at the end of the day, I guess ultimately what you and I both know for sure is both of these fights could technically have an asterisk, and when we're investing time, money into these fights, we don't want an asterisk. We want a definitive result, because if nothing else, as a fan of either fighter, you're left with questions as to whether the fighter you wanted to win could have, or if the fighter that you didn't want to win won because of something else outside of the actual event. And perhaps we have rematches in the future. Who knows? It doesn't seem likely, but if nothing else, there's certainly some unfinished business with all four of these fighters.
The one thing you have to keep in mind, I think, in both instances, it worked out better for the UFC. It worked out better for the promotion in the long run. Overeem, incredibly experienced, well-rounded. The killer, let's call him horse meat Overeem, wasn't there. This was a tactical fight. That killer instinct really wasn't there. He was fighting a very safe fight. The up-and-coming hard hitter won. I think that's, marketability-wise, that's better for the UFC in the long run. I also have never really been impressed with the performances of Stefan Struve. He's kind of an outlier in terms of his height and all that stuff. I think they'll get more mileage out of Ben Rothwell. Not a ton more, but certainly more. So I think the two people that won work out better for the promotion.
Well, we certainly appreciate you guys checking this out. And we will be back very shortly with more commentary.